Hello, everybody, and hello, Louie. We are here for something brand new that we hope everyone's going to enjoy, and we hope goes well. It is Tales from the Triptych, and this is the inaugural edition, and it's going to be on Cambridge glass. And we've had some fun working out the technology on this because this is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. We are going to do an entire deep dive / show and tell online. So we're going to do everything through video. So starting things off, we've got Tales from the Triptych. If you know what a triptych is, great. If not, look it up. But the basics is triptych includes the word tri, think tricycle, think triangle, think three, think the threesome that is Patrick, Katie, and Nate. So say hello, Katie and Nate.
Hi, everyone.
We've got Katie, we've got Nate, we've got Trusty. We are all here tonight. We are the Triptych, and we are doing hopefully what will be a new ongoing series, Tales from the Triptych, where we will take an individual topic and do effectively a deep dive, but do an online deep dive where we can show all kinds of stuff that we would never be able to show if we were doing a video on actually with what we have holding in our hands. So this will hopefully be every week at this time. Really appreciate those of you who are checking us out for the first time. Katie, why don't you go ahead and tell us? And Nate, why don't you go ahead and tell us who do we got in the chat tonight?
Well, we got some great folks in the chat tonight. I see Aaron, the Collection Vintage, Carrie, KCATX, Poodle, Angela's here, Beth, Cam, and who else do we have, Nate?
I can see Belinda Carroll. I can see Angela Marksbury, Pamela Blanchard, Elderly Poodle's here. Tearfane is here from Canada. Hi, Tim. Cindy Brenner is here.
Fantastic.
Jamie's joining us and so many other folks. Thanks, guys, for tuning in tonight.
Yeah, thanks all of you for joining us. I hope you like the new format and hope you like the new show. We kind of flipped a coin and decided that since this quote unquote time slot is usually when I do my deep dives, since deep dives are now merging with Katie's show and tells, those will now be on Wednesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Those will be now duo dives, and the first one of those is coming up this Wednesday. We're going to use this slot for this new show, Tales from the Triptych. And so it's my first slot, so I'm the one hosting, and just picked one of the topics that a lot of us were interested in and thought we could do a little bit more of an exploration, Cambridge glass. So if you have been a follower of my channel in the past, you might have noticed a few months ago, I did a trip to the Cambridge Museum. And I actually posted some video showing the tour of my museum. I had an interview with a docent that talked a lot about the manufacturing process. The Cambridge glass, based in Cambridge, Ohio. They were founded in 1873. They built their first factory in 1899, and they actually ended up closing in 1954. But did some financial restructuring, reopened the next year in 1955, but then closed for good in 1958. So this was an image that's actually from the Cambridge website, which we will actually be visiting and spending a lot of time on tonight. But this is what their factory initially looked like. The factory itself is now gone, but the factory or the Cambridge Museum is in Cambridge, Ohio. It is run by the Collectors Club. And it is still open to the public. Its primary hours are during the summer, so it's open right now. So anyone can visit, and it is basically run by the docents. The docents are actual members of the Cambridge Collectors Club. So it's kind of cool that a Collectors Club has actually taken it upon themselves to create a full-fledged museum. So one of the things I wanted to cover is some of the videos and talk. Yeah, we definitely want to talk about Cambridge. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about the tour and about seeing the facility, even though it's not the factory anymore, they just talked a lot about how glass was made. And we talk a lot about it on my channel. Katie talks about it. Nate, does a lot with glass, even in New Zealand. Glass has been manufactured similar ways for thousands of years. And so they have a video on their website. I'm going to go ahead and kick this video off.
Before you start that, Patrick,
Sure,
I just say hello to Judy Scarlett. Hello, Judy, and Jenny Lyle. Hello, honey. And Jamie, Mid-Century Wasted. So cool to see you. And Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Nice to see you too, buddy. And Rebecca Higgins. Hello, Baxter. Lovely to see you here. And Kat, Champ. Hi, Champ. And Book Bewitched as well. Dawn. Hello. And Gabby. Hi, Gabby Lush. Nice to see you.
Awesome. Thanks so many people for joining in. I hope you'll enjoy the show. So this video, you'll actually, and we'll have links in the description of the video as we once the show ends, because to a certain extent, this is a work in progress. We're not sure how all the technology will work as we're showing all the screens, but this is one that is a link from the Cambridge site. It's actually oddly a hidden link, so we will put that in the description of our video. But it's a really cool video that shows the manufacturing of the glass. So this is a video that they did back in the 50s, and it shows the glass being added to the blow tube, and then you can see he's blowing into the end of it to make it slightly larger, and then he's opening the mold. So a lot of times we talk about molded glass, and it's still blown. So they were still blowing, it's still attached to that tube. There's still going to be a pontil on the bottom, but they are blowing it into the shape. And that's how a company like Cambridge could make so many pieces that have the exact same size and shape. So in this one, they're now taking, so that's the piece that came out of the mold. You can see the bowl of the glass. It looks odd, but there's some more video that'll show a little bit more of it. But he's putting it into another mold that is actually going to form the stem. So as you can see, he had put some hot glass into that bottom mold, and then he just attached the stem to that piece. So now they put it back onto the blow tube, and now they just put some more molten glass onto the bottom of the stem that they just attached. And now they're going to flatten that piece out, and they're going to make the base. So that's where when you're looking at glass, the shape of the glass shouldn't change that much because it is formed in a mold. So does the stem, but that base is actually hand applied. So that can change. And then this is just a little piece I thought was fun. They're making a picture. You can see the way they've attached the handle. So one, if you looked, you could see he was swinging it back and forth. We talk about swung glass. Well, that's one of the things they do to make the swung glass. They swing it. But here they are adding a handle. So this is a 10-minute long video. I'm not going to try and get you to go through the whole thing. That would be way too long, and you don't need me narrating the entire thing. But I thought it was fun to kind of show how basically when we talk about blown glass, we think it's free form, or we think it's on the it's going to have a pontil. And so here's kind of the combination of two. It's being blown into a mold, so you get this consistent shape, but it's still hand blown glass.
Now, Patrick, wasn't the first piece of glass that Cambridge made actually a 3-pint pitcher?
Yes. So that was one of the things that comes from my video, which you'll be able to catch on my YouTube channel, which I'll put as a link as well. They patented the design of their pitcher, and the first item that came out, the first piece of production that came out was in 1902. So if you remember, the factory was built in 1899. It probably just maybe it took a couple years. Maybe that was when it was started. So there's a little bit of math that sometimes gets to be tracked. But yes, the first piece was actually a pitcher that came out in 1902. And so that one I think is a slightly different kind of pitcher that was shown there. But I thought it was kind of cool to show the way the handle was shown. But one of the things that Katie's talked a lot about on her channel is etches and cut glass. So one of the things I wanted to show was another video. This is actually my video. So this is just a portion of what I shown. There's me in the background because I was standing in front of a mirrored display case. I'm going to show this piece, and it kind of like walks through what actually happens when you etch glass. And so you can kind of see this first picture before I start playing it. This first piece, there's this tissue paper that's been wrapped onto the side of this wine glass. So think about the glass that was made earlier. You've got the wine glass. They're now going to be etching it. So they use this. They use a design to get this wax paper image put on there, and then I'm not going to give you you're going to get the steel plate. That's what I was trying to think of. So the steel plate is what they pull the design off of. So every different etch has its own little design. And you can see there's gaps there between where the tissue paper is. You can see clear glass. So right now they're going to pull the tissue paper off, where they pull it off, every place that's white is actually going to be open to the glass. So that way, when you go to etch it, where you see all of these little floral designs and all these little vines, that's where the acid would then etch into the picture. And this little black area, you can kind of see a little bit of it here at the top. It's kind of like this wax that they've applied that'll protect the glass so that you don't get, it doesn't etch anyplace else. But if you look at the way this tissue paper was attached, there's gaps between it. So there's all these sections of the glass that if you don't do anything with it, when you go to acid etch it, it would etch all of these extra pieces too. So what they do, and you can see this next piece coming up in the background, it's all covered in this like amber color. Well, it's wax, and I'm showing the wrong one. So for some reason I did them out of order, or no, this is the right one. So they've taken the tissue paper off, but you can see there's all these extra gaps in here, and that right now those would get etched too. So they send it into the little department, and then they paint with wax, and they fill all these other areas to fill in all the black areas. So now the only thing that's showing here is all this stuff that looks white. That's what's clear. When they dip it in the acid, every part of the glass is going to be protected except for what is exposed. And that's what's going to give you. So that's the finished painted piece. They've also have to paint the inside with wax so that it doesn't etch the inside. And you can see the back piece actually has that etch in place. So they have that, and you have to apologize while I set this up. I can only have so many videos running at one time. This one, you'll actually get to see the factory doing it, and it's super cool. So I definitely wanted to be able to show this. And then we're going to look at some of these pieces on, what does this mean in the real world? Like what's happening with Cambridge in eBay, Etsy, and some of the specialty glasses that they make. So there's two types of designs. There's cut glass, which is what this guy's doing right here. So there's actually a moving wheel. So he is actually freehand engraving those pieces. So
Wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing.
And so the way they explained it is those white lines, those are just guidelines. Like they get painted to show the symmetry of the glass. And then this guy's just so good. He just knows where to put the cuts. So here's the etching part. So that's the wax paper. That's the steel plate. So they're putting that black like wax on there. He then presses the tissue paper into the wax, and he's picking up the design is the kind of the reverse of the etch. This is the step where all the women are making sure that tissue paper is attached really, really well so that you get that design attached in the best way possible so that there's, again, no gaps in the actual plate design. And then they're going to take, once that's all been pressed in, they'll take the tissue paper off. And that's what she's doing here. So she's wet the tissue paper to make it easier, and she's just peeling it back so that she can, you just got that black image like I showed you in the other video to show what the pattern looks like. Now we've got the step where she has to fill in all the gaps. And she's also making sure that there wasn't anything inadvertently pulled off when she...
It's quite incredible. It's amazing, incredibly labor intensive. It's hard to believe that they could actually produce all of these steps to make something that wouldn't cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
And that's probably why they didn't make it past 1954. So right. They did it for a really long time. And, they had some steps like this acid step is what's coming up. So they were able to put all of those individual pieces that the women were doing. They could at least make this step a little bit faster. But it's one of those cases that think about Cambridge. It can be lovely. People like it, but maybe people take it for granted. And that's why I wanted to do this as one of the first triptychs, is to say there's a lot of work and a lot of hand work that goes into making a piece of glass, including Cambridge. And, it's just one of those to actually be able to see it in detail, and then we'll compare it against what's, out there for sale. So this is the acid dipping part. So I don't know how they're actually attached there.
I was wondering how they attach them.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually said, because I don't know if they're locked into something, because then like this whole process is they use them all on that board. So somehow maybe there's a base that they're attached to, because you figure the base sometimes get etched. So maybe it works differently. But then, they're all cleaned up and you've got the finished pieces coming out. I did want to show one thing, which is just heartbreaking, but it's a real portion of it. This happens earlier in the process because you obviously don't want to get this far in and then have to do it. There's the inspection process.
Oh, I know. Quality control.
Quality control.
Brutal. This is going to be brutal.
So hopefully you can hear the sound. But there's the damage. There's the not quality is being dumped into a barrel. So that's what happened with quality control.
Can they remelt down the glass and reuse it?
Yeah, I think this is one. I don't remember if we got into that, but just from what I know about glass in general, there shouldn't be anything, particularly this clear stuff. There shouldn't be anything that would prevent it from just going back into those furnaces. So you'd have that molten glass that they could pick up again. So it doesn't necessarily go to waste, but you figure every one of these pieces was hand blown by somebody. The stem was attached, the base was attached, and now it's just been thrown away, and they just have to do another one.
Hours worth of work down the drain.
Absolutely, I do remember. I don't have it queued up, but I do remember. Actually, it's at the beginning of this video. That the way the production was done, I kind of showed the mold that made the glass. So this is a bigger one. This is to make a centerpiece bowl. Some of these molds were so big that they really couldn't move very often. So what would happen in a lot of cases, this was according to the docent, what would happen in a lot of cases is that these pieces, these molds would get put onto a person's workbench, and that would be the only thing they would make for weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
You showed that with the swan bowl.
Yeah, exactly. The other one was a swan one. It was like, that was even bigger. And it was just, it wasn't practical to move it around. You know, they were just too heavy. So by the time you were done, the people were like, oh God, I just don't want to ever make another one of these ever. But you know, you do your job. And that was part of it.
Now, speaking of molds, did Cambridge actually get some of their molds from other companies that closed down?
I did not see or hear any of that, but a lot of the reverse is what I understand had happened, because they started early enough that they were one of the earlier companies. So there may have been some that might have closed in the 30s or 40s that they may have picked up. That piece, I don't know. Maybe some people in the chat, that'd be something fun we might be able to explore. But definitely when they closed for good, like even when they closed, so they closed twice. And I'm a little unclear on that one. They closed in 1954, but reopened in 55. Even between the time they closed in 54 and reopened, some of their molds got sold then because people thought they were done. Like, you know, so they did sell some of their molds to Imperial Glass. There were a couple of companies that ended up making some of those pieces. Then they reopened in 1955, but they only lasted another 3 years. And once they closed at that point, everything was gotten rid of. So one of the things that they're doing at the museum is they're trying to bring some of those pieces back. So like some of the furniture from from the production facilities. And then they're creating these galleries where they're trying to get an example of everything they produced. And that ain't an easy thing to do when you were in production for over 50 years and you made just amazing variety. And in some cases, one piece that may have been designed in multiple colors with different etches, with different cuts, with, all different pieces. But these are all the things you'll see if you get a chance to go to the museum, or if you watch my video, I do I do walk along a couple of these aisles and pick up some of the individual pieces. My video kicks off with Rubina because that is one of the popular ones. And it is, what I found interesting about it is I'd never heard of Rubina. So this goes back to into the 1920s. And this, you can see all these multiple colors that are built into this. There's like a really dark green, there's an amber, there's kind of a reddish color. The problem is, not really a problem, but the fact is the way these get produced, it's all about how the glass comes in and out of the oven. And when this piece this is part of the Rubina display. What does that look like, Katie? That doesn't look like
a lot like Amberina, but
it looks exactly like Amberina. And that's so a lot of people see these in the wild and they think that's what it is. And even the docent, she said in some cases they have a hard time recognizing, I don't know if they actually ever did a true Amberina, but depending on the shape, they have to try and figure out, well, is that one of ours? Is that Rubina? Because it's not always this perfect blend of all of these different colors. So I have never seen this in the wild. Have you guys?
I've never seen it at all until you showed it in your video, and I was totally fascinated by the different colors.
And you can even look at it like in the back, that dolphin, like this dolphin at least has a red shape to it, but that dolphin before it was like almost all green. It didn't look like it had any variation to it at all. So it's just one of those cases that if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to miss it. So I guess there's a little bit of color on the bottom. But this is one that you do actually see quite often. So I think I was looking for something else before. We'll go ahead and do this. So if you look and you know the name of it, if you look for Cambridge Rubina, you'll actually come across quite a bit of it available. So I just hopped onto eBay. Nothing special. Anybody can do this. And just as a quick scroll through here, you'll end up seeing a pretty wide variety. What's interesting, and this is, do you collect much Cambridge, Katie?
I have a few pieces of Cambridge, but I don't have as much as I do as Fostoria. I love Fostoria. Of course, Cambridge is gorgeous too, so I'm probably going to have to start a collection of that soon. Yeah, I have a little bit of their Chantilly, I believe.
Okay. Now, do you see Cambridge at all down there, Nate?
No. I searched our local online site before the show, and there was no Cambridge whatsoever.
Okay.
Listed there, none.
Now we have a good question coming in from Teofane. He's asking if Cambridge glass is marked or if it had a foil label.
Okay, so this is one of the things that's actually discussed a little bit in more detail with in the video that I post it's actually toward the very beginning. The docent addressed that when they first started producing the very earliest pieces did have the Cambridge. It was a C, I believe, in a triangle. I forgot to look that part up, so I apologize, but it was marked.
I think in your video show that there was some lettering on the first run of Cambridge.
Yes.
That then switched to the triangle with the C.
Okay, and then they got rid of it completely because what was happening was this was getting, they were making what we see as a lot of these pieces are just decorative arts. They were making dinnerware. And what was happening was they were getting complaints through their sales team that the housewives that were trying to buy these pieces did not like the advertising that was because it's glass, so you could see it coming through.
Yep.
And so they didn't like the way it looked. So from that point forward, like back in the 20s, they stopped marking everything and it just got a label. So most of the pieces you're going to come across will not be marked in any way, and that is totally normal. That doesn't mean it's a reproduction. It literally means they stopped doing it because they were listening to the customers.
Yep.
So that's an excellent question, Tim, because it's one of those we always like to look for it, but in Cambridge you're not going to find it. And in looking for glass, what you have to consider, and this goes for any sort of thing you're collecting. We all now, maybe you didn't know before joining tonight, but we all know now this is, Cambridge Rubina. And okay, well, let's look for Cambridge Rubina. If somebody had gone to a garage sale and just picked up this compote and is now going to sell it on eBay, they are not going to know. It's probably not going to know it's Cambridge, and they're certainly not going to know it's a Rubina. So in some cases, if you're looking for better options, like go with a more popular term, so maybe they're going to know Cambridge Amberina, even though technically Cambridge Amberina didn't exist. You'll see some people are listing Rubina right next to the Amberina because they can catch both. This one has both. This one has both. In some cases, you're going to find this one doesn't have the word Rubina at all. It just has the word Amberina. So you might be able to find things, sneak things in, although that's Chrome Crafts. That might be something different. Summit was one of the ones that purchased the molds. So Caprice is a pattern. And that's actually something that I was really, really confused by. And I think, Katie, you're probably more knowledgeable on this. And maybe, I don't know if Fostoria does the same thing, but Caprice was the pattern. And then Rubina was the color. And so how does Fostoria refer to their collections?
So it's interesting with Fostoria because you will have a sort of a line of glass. And sometimes I think what gets confusing, and this kind of goes along with the color thing, is when you get into glassware that has maybe a pattern, like say in Fostoria, it's the Baroque pattern, but maybe they have the Lido etch. So then you run into people that are confused because it's one line, but then you have an etch that's different. And so it's sort of similar to the color idea, is that maybe you have a line, but then it's actually a different color within a line. And usually they'll mark the line with a number.
So their pieces are actually marked?
Not on the physical pieces, but usually
okay.
it'll be, line, just making up a number here, like line number 337. And that's how a lot of glass collectors, true glass collectors, will go by it, that line number. So it's a little easier to understand. And then they may say, okay, this is Baroque line 337, just giving that as an example. And then say, okay, this has the Lido etch or the Shirley etch or whatever, to specify it a little bit more.
And that's also because that's definitely something you'll be able to find in Cambridge, because if you know their etches, they have hundreds of etches. But that's another, unless you're a collector, it's very, very difficult to know if you've got a piece of Cambridge. If I just check out this next listing, it's listed as Tiffin, Cambridge, Fostoria. Like they have no idea what it is, or they're just trying to capture every keyword so that somebody, like it could be Hobby Lobby for all we know, but they're going to try and put the keywords in there, because if somebody's looking for Fostoria, they may look at that and either say, that's not Fostoria, don't waste my time, or, oh my God, that is Fostoria. And so they're hoping someone else will know. Same thing with this. It's a pattern is called Caprice. Now, I don't exactly, 95 might be the mold, like the actual making it a salt. That part I'm not 100% sure on, but Caprice was, I guess, probably maybe the equivalent of what you were saying, Katie. It's like the equivalent of a line. So that Caprice has these swoopy, like very kind of nouveau, like wave lines going through it. It's very distinctive. It's one of the few patterns I can actually recognize on sight. I don't know if I would have recognized it in this, but in bigger bowls and bigger pieces, because it just has these big swooping curves. If you don't have a book, you're like, even the etches. I mean, I've posted stuff on my Instagram page and asking people, hey, does anyone recognize this? And even glass experts are like, okay, I looked at my books and I can't find it, because they all look the same. I know they don't look the same. They all look similar enough that the etches start getting very confusing. And then you also put it on top of a piece that, and I should have preset it, and I can't remember where I would have seen it, but one of the things that they talked about, and we can use this as an example. So this one is a Rubina. They're saying it's honeycomb. That part I don't know, but you can see this shape. There was and Nate, I know that you rewatched the video today, so I don't know if you remember seeing it. They had a line of bowls that they had made, and what the difference was they did the mold, but then depending on what you did with the lip, it became a different piece.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So in some cases it was like vertical, and in some cases it was flared horizontal, in some cases it had a really sharp angle, and all of a sudden it's like, that doesn't look like the same piece, but to a Cambridge collector, they would know. And so it's really, really difficult if you're trying to build a Cambridge collection. If you only go off of the keywords that the collectors know, you're going to pay a premium price, because you're going to say, okay, this person knows it's Cambridge. Ignore when it says rare. That's crazy. That's silly. But if they know it's Cambridge, they know it's the right color, even if they're faking it like that Tiffin one. They kind of know what they have, and they're trying to get it. Where you might make more luck is if you're like red and amber glass bowl. That's going to be a piece that maybe you'll get lucky. It's something that came from a garage sale and someone's trying to sell it and they don't know what they have. So sometimes you can get lucky.
And that's really where you're going to find, I think, some of the best deals, is by finding things that aren't really listed as Cambridge. They're not really sure what they have, and so you might get a better deal that way.
Exactly. And the more detail they do have, like I personally am not familiar with Mondrazato Sommerso, but they're saying it's Murano. Well, that's why you're going to get these higher prices because, okay, it's falling under the keywords that I entered, but there's some high end tied to it. You know, you're going to get, or somebody might mark something as Ellie Smith. It's not Ellie Smith. You know, some people think they know what it is. So sometimes you don't want to over analyze your search because like, oh, you know what you're looking for. But you got to think like a reseller that if you want a good deal, you got to try and find it.
Yeah, exactly.
And Caprice was manufactured from 1936 to 1958.
Thank you, Katie. I did not have the dates on that. So one of the things I wanted to show, because a lot of things that you'll find from Cambridge is, I will just say here in the Midwest, I'm in Illinois. It was manufactured in Ohio. I see a lot of it. Now, Katie, you focused on Fostoria. So do you see a lot of Cambridge? Do you see more Fostoria? What do you see in Florida?
I actually see quite a bit of Cambridge. And in fact, I just got some Rose Point I saw in an antique store the other day. And so you really do see kind of a mix of that elegant glass. But what I am finding here is that because we talked about the etches being so confusing, people tend to get really confused on what they have. And so it really does take some glass research and books and online to figure out exactly if what the seller is selling is correct in their etch and pattern. Because that is really difficult. And especially when you get into the delicate flowers and some of these acid etched pieces, I mean, it's incredibly hard to see the differences unless you're really holding the two pieces up close.
I end up having like a little private jump for joy moment in the rare cases. The only etch I have been able to identify on site is Heisey Orchid.
Yeah.
That's it. It's very distinct. I do not come across it very often, although I will say I've come across it probably a half a dozen times. But so when I see it, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. And it's not that it's particularly valuable or rare or anything. It's just, I get so excited because it's one that I can see. I've had people tell me point blank, oh, what you have is this. And I look at it, I'm like, I don't see the difference between that and something else. Like they are very, very similar. And it also changes the type of piece you have, because the pattern may be like look one way on a wine glass, but it may look totally different on a dinner plate because you've got different areas to be able to cover. But as vast as Cambridge is, you do come across it a lot, but they're all pretty mundane pieces. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it's beautiful, but you can find a lot and you can build a collection fairly quickly if you just want Cambridge glass. What I wanted to show, and I apologize, I have to like set myself back up again. But one of the things that they showed were because this is the museum, there are a couple of specialty items that they have. And so these are the types of things that it's kind of like, it's probably foolish to think you'll find them, but it's kind of like a be on the lookout moment. And they are in this next section. These are lamps that they created. Now, first of all, and I say this in my video, what were we going to say, Nate?
These are my favorites.
They're fantastic. And I say this in the video, I wouldn't have even known these were glass. Like if I saw these in the wild, I would not have even known these were glass. I would have assumed they were pottery.
I think earlier in the video you showed an azure blue one of the monkeys that was just stunning.
Yeah, so they're pretty decent size. They have this small little collection of them, with a couple representations. So they got the owls and the monkeys. And so one of the things that I did was I was curious, how rare are these? And I will just say there are currently no listings in, at least listed under Cambridge owl, Cambridge monkey. I didn't get into like just completely random monkey glass. I didn't have the time to do that. But what I did do is I pulled up the Worth Point examples, and just in July 31st, so just a little over a month ago, one of these sold.
Holy moly.
For $1,350. So for those of you who are not familiar with Worth Point, it will basically take eBay. It's primarily eBay, but it'll take eBay America as well as eBay UK and then some other auction sites and amalgamates them all together over a 10-year period. When you're in eBay, you can see sold comps for the last 90 days. And I should have shown you that. I might go back and show it later. What Worth Point will do is it'll show you sales comps over the last 10 years. Now, sometimes it's irrelevant because what something sold for 10 years ago, like does it really matter? But in some cases you can see, was it rare back then? What made it more popular? And so there were only a couple, and I just did a search, Cambridge monkey. Like that was all I did. I tried to keep it simple, but I did include Cambridge. So it happens to be, these are sorted by a date. So this was the most recent one, was $1,350. And then there was a black glass one, or it looks like it's a black glass, sold for just a couple months earlier in March of this year for basically $1,500. So it's beneficial to be able to look at something like WorthPoint to get a couple of older comps, because sometimes you'll see an anomaly. So like maybe the one that sold in July sold for $1,500, but the one that sold 3 months earlier only sold for $500. So then it's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, like which is more accurate? So sometimes you have to go back and find other examples. There aren't any. I'm back to 2019, and there are no more. So these do not come up in traditional popular sale offers. So like maybe this would be something that could end up at a Christie's or a Sotheby's, because a really good example of these could definitely go for a couple of $1,000s if it's in pristine condition. The museum actually has, some really rare examples of some of the pieces that they want to put on display. They have damaged pieces in their collection because they literally cannot find any. So one of them was in the video.
Oh, the mannequin's head.
Yes, and it's this. It was just coming up. It was just past this section. They have glass mannequin display heads, and so I'm going to let this play, and we'll switch over to it. And there you go.
Wow.
So you can. So this is absolutely phenomenal. And again, so this is the ebony glass, and there's an Ebon glass which came out much, much later. This was the earlier one. And so this is their ebony their ebony collection. This is glass. Same thing. If I'd seen this in the wild and I just saw it like sitting on a shelf, so I just would have assumed that was porcelain.
Yeah.
So
they wasn't the Ebon matte finish glass.
I'm trying to remember the difference between the two. Now that you say that, that might have been the case. Maybe that was the satin glass. I just remembered that it was that was the differential between the two. So it might have also been the finish. The earlier ones had a lot of the overlay as well. So the silver overlay is either silver or platinum, and then the gold is legitimately gold. The gold was usually painted in-house. They actually did the gold there in Cambridge. The silver and the platinum they actually sent to an outside company. But this mannequin head, they only had two in their entire display. So this one with the ebony, and then there was, I think it was an amber one. And the amber one literally had a giant crack running through it. And they put it in the museum anyway, because they said it was literally the only other piece they could find. I didn't find any in WorthPoint. There are none available on eBay or Etsy. Like these things just do not exist. So this is one of those, it's like, again, kind of maybe silly to say be on the lookout because they're so rare, but this is something anybody would want in their collection. And I will tell you, if you find one, the museum is going to want this in their collection because they just can't find them.
It's totally amazing.
And that might be something too that would come up at a flea market somewhere, and somebody may not know what it is.
Yep.
And you pick it up and you are like jumping for joy because it's so hard to find.
Well, and it's also one of those rare cases, because like this is something I talk about a lot, and Nate's really big into this too, and Katie, is damage. Like to a certain extent, if I were to come across any of these pieces, even though these are the earliest pieces that they produced, if I saw something had a crack, if I saw something had a chip, if there was something wrong with it, I would completely walk away from it, because they're common, in my opinion, they'd be common enough that I don't need to resell an inferior version of it. But when you see something like that and you suddenly realize how rare it is, a little chip or a little crack, that's fine. they're still going to want it. And so this one, the way I did the video is they're done kind of in the progression of how they produce their line. So like turquoise was a really early line for them, but a lot of what they did is this area down here. And this is one of those that I really feel is a potential collectible area, but I did some searching and it's really kind of hard. This is their pharmacy collection. So you can see like these are little beakers. So like a pharmacist could make, do the medical mixing and everything. This was a huge portion of their business at the beginning of the company. And there should be tons and tons of pieces out there, but most of them weren't marked. And so it's one of those cases that they're so utilitarian. It's how do you know if you come across, like I've come across these jars before. I never would have guessed it was over 100 years old. So it's like, it's one of those, I don't even know how you recognize, the age of some of these pieces, because clear glass, although Katie and Daniel are trying to make a comeback, bring back the clear glass, something that's utilitarian does not have the appeal of something even like the juicer that's at the top of the page. But it's one of those, like, the way they built up their company, the fact that they had this high quality and really clear, well-made glass made it really well for, and some of these pieces would have been heated, they would have been handled in a laboratory environment. And they actually built a good chunk of their business that way. And so some of them should have the Cambridge still molded into them, because obviously it's not dinnerware. But this is something that I personally have not come across them before. So I don't know. Katie, do you actually ever come across this kind of stuff?
I never have. Now, I will say our local Mayo Clinic has a great example of early medical bottles and different prescription bottles from probably the 18 and 1900s on display. And one of the pieces they do have is a clear glass apothecary jar. Now, I'm wondering if maybe that's Cambridge and I didn't know it, but I always marvel at that display.
And it's one of those cases, like, I hate to say that if you see it, it must be Cambridge. 'Cause I'm sure other places did it, but I have to say, I don't know who would have, if it's vintage. I know like modern stuff, but modern stuff would probably not be nearly as heavy or as thick walled as some of what they did. One of the other areas that I highlighted, and this again gets into kind of learning a little bit more about Cambridge, but I found this fascinating, was this little collection. Well, it's not even all that little. This collection that is one of their cases. This is their cordial collection. And two things I found interesting about this. One, they close the museum down in the fall and winter. They probably just don't have the traffic, or they don't have the volunteers, whatever. But that's when they choose to clean it. And whenever they close, they open up every cabinet and every single piece gets cleaned. They said they hate doing this cabinet. So Nate would probably go crazy. Like, Nate would probably volunteer. Like, yes, let me polish all of this.
Yeah, I'd be right into that. And I think you said that they found that the most daunting.
It's because, I'm not highlighting next, but think of the other shelves that one case just had the 4 or 5 monkey lamps in it. Like, yeah, I'll take that case. They're the most expensive things in the building, but I'll do the 5 monkey lamps as opposed to the 500 cordials. But what's great about this, and you can see it in more detail in the video, and then also in the gallery, they made a cordial version of every single wine glass they produced. So this is the area that they're like hunting for every example to make sure that they get every cross reference that they can, because they want to have every etch, they want to have every wheel cut and everything. And it's just simply a smaller version of the wine glasses.
That is incredible. I would be with Carrie. I would not want to be responsible for touching any of them.
Well, and that one is like, it's like a domino effect. Like, if you inadvertently knock one over, can you imagine the damage you could do in that cabinet?
Oh, that would be horrible, especially since they're trying to find every etch and wheel cut. Like, you mess up one and then trying to find it again would be probably almost impossible.
Absolutely. So a lot of so again, I just did a quick search. Again, this is kind of making the presumption that someone who's selling this knows that these are Cambridge. So, but in some cases, particularly in the cordials, they might have been boxed sets, or they were given as gifts for weddings. So in some cases, there would still be the card or something that would indicate. So in some cases, if they're sets, they might have stuck together and people would find them. But, when you're looking at the cordials, you can kind of see, like, I wouldn't have even known that these were considered cordials, but yeah, right here. So there are different versions of the cordials. So, like, I don't know what the larger version would look like if this is the smaller version, like maybe like more like a goblet. so this one's saying Fostoria, but somewhere they must have called it at Cambridge. Again, in some cases you just get people that are trying to grab the right, grab the keywords to get people like clickbaiting. Cambridge Rose Point. I'm a member of the Chicago Glass Society. We just sat through, had a presentation on the Rose Point. And so this is a specific etch. So when you're talking about Rose Point, we're talking about the etch. I sat through an hour presentation, it's probably not quite a half hour, like maybe a half hour presentation on Rose Point. I still can't recognize it.
Tearfane's asking how the museum acquires new pieces. Is that by donation, or do they have a budget to buy new pieces?
It is completely supported by their members, and their members do have dues. So there is a little bit of a budget. They do charge admission to come into the museum. They have a gift shop, which I think is one of the coolest things that they do. That is run entirely by donations, so that they can make money in the gift shop to then be able to purchase items that they need for the museum. So that's kind of where they get their acquisition fund. And so I was on a week and a half long trip through Pennsylvania, coming back through Ohio. And I had a Culver glass chip and dip set, which the resale value of that, if I had sold it, probably would have been in the $45 to $50 range. I walked out to my car, pulled it out of the box, and handed it to them. I'm like, here, this is like my favorite place I've ever been. And, it doesn't have to be, it does not have to be a Cambridge, for them to sell it, because they're doing it as a fundraiser. They do have a lot of Cambridge. Like, one of the things they do, and I'll show it in the video in a minute, because it is kind of cool. They recreated their sample room. So like what they would have had back when the factory existed for the sales team to take customers and like department stores and things like that to say, here's all of our samples. They recreated that. And that is the part of the gift shop. And so every item you see in this sample room is a clear glass version of one of their etches, and they're all for sale. And it's just super cool. So this happens to be Rose Point. I will forget this 2 seconds later. I'm not going to remember what this looks like. Like they're all just so similar.
And it's hard too, because when you look at Rose Point, I mean, the way the roses are done, looks a lot like Fostoria Navarre and a few of those other patterns that we see out in the wild. So you really need to have kind of them side by side to memorize. And that's where a book that maybe you can purchase, and I think I even saw on Cambridge Glass website, you can buy an original reproduction catalog from that year of that particular line. And they really do some great up close sketches of the detail of the etch. So you can really compare those side by side with several other pieces that might look similar.
Absolutely. And it is a dedicated thing. Like, it's, I know Nate has some programming he'll be doing as we continue with the Triptych, and I'm excited to, it's learning this research, learning it visually to be able to say, okay, here's how you can compare two that look very similar. Here's how this one is Rose Point and this one is Rose Vine or whatever, from the different types. But I did pull up the video for the sample room. So this is they found the door, literally they found the old door that somebody had. And so they recreated this little room, and I think a couple of these pieces of furniture are original. The clock is original. I think I mentioned that, but every single piece in this room is for sale. So you've got all these different etches. They're all marked. That's the benefit of being run by the Collectors Club. They know, they can look at something and know exactly what it is. So all of these pieces are marked. They're properly marked. This is one of the things they make available is this little, it's like a little Xerox brochure. I think it was like $1 or $2, $3. And it was not only what did the pattern look like, but what different pieces did it get put on. So you had an idea, because in some cases, not every piece got a certain etch. In some cases, they did certain combinations. And in some cases, they were not really available in the United States. Like one of the examples is the Diane etch. And I know I've talked a little bit to Nate about this because I was curious. They made a pink glass with a Diane etch as a custom order for a department store or something in Australia. Every single piece of Diane pink wine glasses, every single piece was sent out of the country. It doesn't exist here in the United States. So it's extremely rare. I could not find any examples. Nate was having problems finding any examples. So did you ever find one, Nate?
No, I didn't. Every time I did a Google search on Cambridge, Diane, and a glass, and pink, it gave me it changed Diane to Diana and gave me results for the Princess Diana and Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge. So no, I found nothing at all, and none on our local site for sale either.
Yeah, so it's like they're not even letting it leave Australia to go to New Zealand. Like there was just a very small number that was created, and they didn't have any examples in the museum because they couldn't find it either. So it's just one of those cases. It's like urban legend of where this existed, and they do have records. Like a lot of their records still exist. So they will try and that's how they're trying to. They know what they're trying to find or what they're missing because they'll have records. But if something was only made for 1 year or one time, because you could custom order, you could go in and you could say like, I want this. This is the picture that they patented. You can see there's a little, there's like a little, what do you call that, Katie? What did you call it? Something like a arrow or dart. There's 4 of these.
Oh yes, the 4 darts.
Yeah, so it's molded into the glass. If you ever see a round, these round pictures do exist from other companies, but you can barely see it there. But if you can see, there's this little pointed line that's molded into the glass that goes all the way down into the base. There's 4 of these around the sides. If you see that, you'll know it's Cambridge.
It's Cambridge.
But what you could do is as a bride, and they said, that's the stuff they'll probably never be able to recreate because they literally have orders from like a bride that says, I want a China pattern of 12 pieces of this exact piece, but in a Diane etch trimmed with gold. Well, maybe they never have done that ever again or ever before. They just this woman wanted it. And if you're willing to pay for it, money talks. So they have the record. So they would know that Imogene Jones of, Wichita, Kansas bought this, but what's the likelihood 100 years later that family still has that service for 12? So it's one of those that that's what the Collectors Club is from across the country. So they have their fine things, but they just did so many custom things that literally could have just been a one-off thing. Like I'm going to do this, they did do, and this I always think is interesting from the Huckster side. There were department stores that did that too. So they would come in and say, okay, I want this exact pattern, but I want it done in gold. And I don't want you to sell it to anybody else because I want this to only be available at the Wanamaker's, or I want this to only be available through Macy's or whatever the store was. And they would do that. So so that's the stuff that they're trying to recollect, is the stuff that was done kind of in bulk, but as special orders as something that wasn't produced repeatedly over their 50 years in business.
Now, I had a question, Patrick, about Diane, because I know that they made Diane, I believe, in like a crystal.
Yes.
Color as well. Now that was around from 1934 to 1956. Is that correct?
I don't know the years. That sounds about right. The video as it was playing, I had the sound turned off, but I know as I got to the upper shelf, one of those shelves was showing Diane, but it was showing it in clear. And so I think I say that in my video as well. So when you do the video of their tour or of my tour, I want to say that one's the Diane. So it's unfortunately not a great video or a great picture of it because it was just done during a video. But yes, so that they have, like in clear, they definitely had it. It was the pink that ended up being super, is super rare.
I see box loads of this sort of glass come up at auction all the time, and I completely ignore it. So I think I really need to pay more attention next time when our auction houses reopen.
And that's one of the things why I wanted to do this, because I admit, I kind of feel the same way. I come across Cambridge all the time. It's usually relatively inexpensive. And I feel like that means it's just not special. And I think it's just because, and again, I think part of it's because I'm in the Midwest. Like I'd be curious, I'm not seeing the chat. I'd be curious, like people that are maybe on the West Coast, I believe Cambridge was sold across the country, but I don't necessarily know how far it made it. You know, it's like one of the cases was when you start getting into the Oregon Trail and like all that. So I guess we're a little bit later than that. But like when people were moving west as air conditioning was invented, were you bringing all your glassware with you? Like how much of this stuff comes up in resale shops or vintage or charity shops, you know, in the West Coast? I just don't know how common that would have been. But but it's, you know, hashtag bring back the clear glass. It's one of those, I feel clear glass is beautiful. It's versatile. And because it is so inexpensive, I mean, picture some of these glasses out at Christmas time, each one with just a simple shiny bright ornament sitting in the middle of it. I mean, it looks freaking awesome because it's clear. It'll go with anything. Like you can put whatever color, you know, shiny bright you want in there, and it's going to go good. As opposed to you put in the amber or even the pink, suddenly it's going to limit your palette of what you can do. So it's really inexpensive, and it's just a matter of educating and then not all things are the same. Like, unfortunately, again, this isn't probably the best picture for it, but you can see just from this is all the same etch because I just know that just because that's the way the shelving units were set up. So I believe this is Diane. I would not die on that hill, but these are all the same etch. But you can see the different shapes of the globes. But more importantly, look at the different shapes of these stems. Like this one, I might walk away from. Like this one's just kind of like it's a red wine glass, got the wider base, pretty simple stem, nothing really special. But good Lord, look at that. It's like amazing. That's sexy. You know, it's got that twisted design at the top. It's got the bulbous anchor in the middle. And then you've got this one that's got, you know, it does the exact same thing. It just doesn't have the extended stem. It's, you know, if you just saw it's clear and walking away, no, look down. Like there's like, what's that clear attached to? But if they're only a couple of bucks, still make sure they're in great condition because that's what's going to make it more special. No one wants to have one with a big crack running down it. There's no value to that. But these are inexpensive to pick up. And then it's one of those, the more you know, and that's why we're doing these, you know, kind of showing off. And, you know, right now, because not everyone can travel to Ohio, you have to do it vicariously by going through, you know, some of their pictures, some of our videos, and they have, you know, really like, check out this lamp. I didn't even know Cambridge did lamps. I didn't really talk about it much in my video, but they had all kinds of like chandeliers. They had all kinds of stuff that I'm like, wow, I had no idea you did that. And they said that like this one, I believe this one, I'm just doing it from, I don't remember it. So I'm just doing it from visual. I think that might be metal. I'm sure these brackets are metal. So they said what they would do is they would make maybe the glass shade, or in the case of some of the chandeliers, like they were making all the globes, and then they'd send it to another company to make the metal parts and to wire it. They did the same thing with clocks. So there were certain things that
that is just absolutely incredible.
So there's a better shot of that's a sample room that as I showed it. So again, this is just like one random corner of their display cases. And so a couple more. This is the same lamp we just saw. So we've just turned the corner. The animal lamps are in here. So the owls and the monkey lamps are right there. Here's the ebony with the head. And then you get into the light blue. And so it's also what's really nice. And my video really didn't have the luxury of covering it. It does show the progress of color. And as Katie's been doing a good job as when I let her talk, is squeezing in the dates, is that some of these dates are a lot older than you would think. And the colors would come in a lot earlier than you'd think. And not all of them are attractive. No. This would not be my go-to pick.
No, not my favorite. I think I'd rather the Rubina over that piece.
Not mine either.
Everybody has their own taste and style.
This is something we do every year. Actually, here's a chandelier. This is a Cambridge chandelier. But this room they have set up, this is not something from the factory. This is something they did specifically for the museum. Every year, they rebuild this room with decor from some era within their production. And you can see this time they use the green glass. So all the dining, all of the plates Everything is set up with the green glass. They've got, green pitcher and accents along the wall. Looks like even, I'm not sure if those are green vases, but here's a monumental vase in the corner. How to use and how people did use Cambridge glass every day. I mean, just check out this table setting.
That is amazing. Now, I love that keyhole design, Patrick, that Cambridge did.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. That is actually a patent.
Yeah.
And that was something that the docent, Anna, that walked me through the tour, that is a very unique aspect to Cambridge. And it is patented. So if you ever see it, and this is what I found interesting, or a version of it, because in some cases they'd cut it in half. So they'd make it like a handle. So you'd only see like this little top part, and then it would be cut off. So like anytime you see a variation of that keyhole design, exactly what they call it, that's
Cambridge. Yeah.
So that's a really good tip. To identify if you don't know everything. They've got a little activity room with the plates. You can do little rubbings. I did that. Here's just another row, like all the uranium glass. They did it. There is a lot to see in this museum.
Patrick, Christy Garza has a question.
Yeah.
In the museum, do they set it up chronologically?
Yes. So let's see if I go back to, if my memory serves me. Yes. This one, so like this, where these little blinds are back here on the top left, you can kind of see there's a window here. That's the door to come in. So when you come in, this piece here, this display cabinet here is the first cabinet you see. This is the oldest, like their first pieces. So that's where the pharmacy pieces are. So that's kind of like the design where the company started. And then as you go around the corner, and that took us to that picture, as you keep walking along this wall, this is getting into, I think the ebony was from the 20s. I think the light blue might have been the 20s, or it might have moved into the 30s. It is pretty chronological, with a couple of exceptions, like the monkey lamps and like the specialty ones. Those were all separate. I also had, I thought I wrote it down where the cut was. There's a section of the of flower frogs, which is what I collect. And so those kind of are grouped together. So there's a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, so that way when you're seeing the colors, and there's that amber one, that's the one that's got the crack in it. But as you're seeing the different, like, so here's all the flower frogs. But the way it's grouped by time is to show how those colors got introduced. And so it is kind of cool, because there were some colors that got introduced I would never have thought were from the teens or 20s. There were some that I would have thought were the 60s, and they didn't even exist in the 60s. So, but this is my personal favorite. I have a collection of flower frogs. I will do we will do a duo dive on flower frogs at some point. But there you can see that big crack. There's a big crack in this one right there, and they still had it because it's literally one of two that they were able to find.
That is amazing. And I think I'm going to be looking for that ebony glass if I can find it, because that is just stunning.
And I wish, because you had a really good question, Nate, and I'm going to see if I can see it really quick. I remember the section that it showed up, but I can't remember if I showed the timing of it. Is that, these are also one of my favorites. This is in honor of the fundraiser we've got coming up for the Doxies, but these are pencil dogs. And so they're little glass bulldogs that have a hole in their mouths to hold a pencil.
Didn't you buy one of these while you were there,
did.
Patrick?
I purchased one of these from their gift shop, and I was super excited to have one because I didn't even know they existed. And you can see, so these existed. They were available earlier, but they were primarily available in the 40s. You could get one when you did a tour of the factory. You got this as a gift. So they were very highly produced at that point. And they said, but this is something I mentioned in the video, they tend to be damaged a lot because they were perfect shape and size to fit into a kid's slingshot. So they get them as free gifts, and then they do use them in their slingshots. So a lot of them are missing their ears or they're chipped up. So it's just like, got to be really careful that they're in good condition. But look at the detail on this one. It has multiple colors, like it's been painted, but you have the clear one. I think mine was purple. Yeah, so those are fun ones.
Now, did other companies make the pencil dogs, or was this just unique to Cambridge?
I do believe I've seen others in a slightly different shape. The other ones that I've seen are still bulldogs, and they still have the hole that goes. But instead of having it go through the mouth, it really goes more through the middle of their head. It's in a weird spot. And so that is a way, I feel like that's a way to know the difference between them. They're not particularly valuable. I think I bought mine at the gift shop as a fundraiser. I think I paid like $35 for mine, but you can find those relatively inexpensive. And they just make a cute little display because you can put them all together and they're just cute.
Can you show the designs that were made for Woolworths?
I can't remember what Woolworths or Sears. There was a Sears catalog. Was there a Woolworths catalog too?
There wasn't a Woolworths
catalog. Oh, the little
there was
animals.
The animals. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. I think it was. Yeah. Sorry, I got to find it. And I'm going to ads coming up soon. So those are the dogs. Okay, we're going to turn off my own monetization. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so that's what my ads look like. Okay, we're gonna skip that. It's like, wait, why am I advertising a bra? So those are the dogs. Where'd the little animals go? Sorry, Dan, I didn't write that one down. I know you'd asked me about it, and I forgot to write it down.
I see.
Well, that'll have to be treats. People have to go back. Oh, there we are. Is that what they are? There we go. I just sent one of these in a mystery box. So somebody's getting lucky. Somebody's going to get one of these in their mystery box.
One of these Woolworths pieces.
Yeah, so these are the Woolworth animals.
Those are amazing.
Butterfly, frog, bird, and
squirrel.
And then they did this. I found interesting too because they did not do a lot in retail, but they did go into a couple, but only in a couple issues of Sears catalog. And so you can kind of see the stuff that was popular in the 20s before the Depression hit. You know, clear glass was that was popular. Like that's what people liked. I also liked, there was a section a little bit before that that talked about, it showed some of the custom colors that they created, and they were not always attractive.
Now, did they ever do any American Brilliance glass, Patrick? Do you know?
They did do cut glass, but I don't think they did to that level. Like this to me is their attempt at it, which is molded. I don't know if they ever replicated that in cut. So they did do wheel cut, but I don't know if they did it to that level. That's an area that I am not particularly familiar with. And that's the benefit of something like the museum and just going through their website. You're going to see things that you didn't even know you wanted to collect. Because this is an area, a very keen area of collecting, is they did the perfume bottles, and they did some amazing perfume bottles. But if you don't have the atomizer in the top, you may just think of the bud vase. So it's one of those, like you start recognizing the shapes, you realize, oh, wow, there's like a whole other subcategory that you can try and collect.
Ricky Donald is asking about the lady flower frogs, and he's asking if they are named. He can't remember.
If they are what?
Named.
Yes. So I pull up the flower frogs again. Sorry. Where'd they go?
It's amazing that they have this glass museum, and it's a great resource to go visit or even look at online and look at your video, Patrick.
Absolutely. And so this is something. And so some of these, they had two different styles of flower frogs that were made. And so this one I just grabbed a still of where we're at. A lot of the ones, and most of the ones that I have from Cambridge. So like this one in the back, it's a kid holding a baby goat, which what is a baby goat called?
A kid.
A kid. So this piece is called Two Kids. So this is the Two Kids piece. And the base is molded in, the piece is molded into the base. So this was all one piece. What they started doing a little bit later is more what this woman is doing. And this is considered the draped lady, not the Bashful Charlotte. Bashful Charlotte is standing behind her. So the Bashful Charlotte does not have any clothing on. The draped lady has a towel. Most people confuse those two, and it's just because you don't normally see them side by side. But you can see the Bashful Charlotte also is molded into one piece. This one, if you look at the very bottom, there's no frog. And so what they were doing was they would sell these as centerpieces as well. So you could make them interchangeable. You could put this, they started doing the flower frogs with an insert that you could put this in there, or you could let it just stand alone or in a separate base. So,
Right.
what I've never come across is the Asian woman. I don't know if she has another proper name, but that's one that I've never seen. I have a draped lady, I have 2 kids, and I have a bashful Charlotte. I can't remember the name of the one with the roses. I think she's carrying a bundle of roses.
Wasn't there a watermelon one that you didn't have as well?
And maybe that's the watermelon one. So yes, there's definitely a couple in here that I've never come across since I did the video. And you can see that somebody was asking before, so I don't have the bird. Let's see if it scrolls back down. The blue one had a label on it, and so you could get an idea of what the how they were marked. I don't know if I can show it again. There we go. So you've got the little black and gold label is how they marked their pieces, but obviously it's right in the front of this piece, so it was designed to be removed.
Yeah.
So for some of the other names, where I got most of my luck is there are specialty books specifically for flower frogs. One of them specializes in the animals, and some of them specialize in some of them specialize in the figures. So there are figurals. So you've got the 2 goats done in the milk glass. I don't have any milk glass ones. So you've got the 2 kids kind of sitting here with milk glass. I want to say maybe that was the watermelon one because he's holding a bowl, but I can't remember if that's the one that he's straddling the turtle. There's a couple that I still need to figure, but you don't come across them. By far, what you come across more than anything else. I do have the large crane. I don't have the small one. So you do have a large crane. You come across the draped lady is by far the most common of the flower frogs. And same thing when you're doing a search. If you just do glass flower frog, and see how you did that not that long ago. Sometimes you don't want to do it with Cambridge, but then you also get just regular flower frogs. But this is worth noting because if you notice this one, there's this ribbed bottom on it. The ribbed bottom is what Summit Glass started doing after they bought the molds. There's only one model that was ever produced by Cambridge, and that was in like 1953 or 1954, right before they closed for the final time. That was the draped lady that had this kind of a base. This one is not a Cambridge piece, but they are saying it is. So there's different people debate it, but to me, this is one of those warning signs. Like even though there might be might be 2 models that they did, it's so rare that this base was used by Cambridge because they had their own molds. Why would they change the base mold to
Exactly
these ribs? So you will see this type of a bottom on a lot of other pieces. To me, I always steer clear of them. I have one, and it was sold to me as an original. And then I discovered the trick, and I realized that I paid $175 for one that was probably worth about $35.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
So it definitely it pays to know. These are things that I do not buy to resell. I probably will be reselling one pretty soon, but it's just because I'm changing my collection size. But it's like sometimes you just need those little tricks. Like if you try to identify something, sometimes it's just as useful to know what it's not than to know what it is. And so this one, it doesn't mean that Summit is any less collectible. Like these are still sellable. These are still collectible, but they're collectible as something different. And Summit isn't as collected as Cambridge.
And you mentioned here that this piece is a reproduction. Now, I'm sure you find that in a lot of the other flower frogs as well that you're looking at when you see Cambridge.
And there are purists that would say that this technically isn't a reproduction because it was a different company who changed the base and they're issuing their own piece. So they weren't necessarily issuing it to because the benefit is they did change the base. So it's like if it was a quote unquote reproduction and being designed to fool you, they probably wouldn't have changed the base. So there are people that would claim that these are not reproductions. They just happen to be later issues. Now, is there a difference? I don't know. but it's, again, there's nothing wrong with buying this. And I'm not even going to say it's not worth $65, but you need to kind of know and start questioning, saying, okay, well, wait a minute, you're saying this is Cambridge. Why are you saying that? I don't think it is. And there's some benefit of knowing a little bit more information. Like this one, this is going to probably go much, much higher. That even though the draped lady isn't particularly rare, in uranium glass she doesn't come across that often, and she's got the original base. So
they didn't refer to it as a uranium glass, though, did they, Patrick? Didn't they name it pale emerald? Or
they did have a different name. So it was made, and it does glow, but it's, yes, you're right, they called it something else. But colloquially, you're going to find it with, now I do not know why they've added the word cars on
That's
the end. Do you guys know what trick is that?
I have no idea why they would label it that. It has really nothing, in my opinion, to do with the flower.
Like if you collect cars, why would, like, she's not a hoard ornament, unless people are trying and say she is a hoard ornament. Like, I don't know. That's actually odd. I hadn't noticed that before.
It's very strange.
But what's also important to note, and this I showed it in that crane one, a lot of them were issued in multiple sizes. So it does pay attention to the descriptions, because this is actually a fairly large one. So the 12.5 is actually pretty. I think that actually is the biggest that the draped lady came in. So it's worth knowing that, like, she also came as a 9, and I want to say she came as a 6. Not necessarily in uranium, that I don't know, but I have a 6 and I have a 9. So it's good to know that, depending on what you're trying to build your collection with, in some cases, like this is actually too large to fit in one of my areas that I display them. So it's like I probably wouldn't buy this one because it wouldn't fit. But they started it at a low amount because they're pretty sure it's going to go up. There's 18 watchers for something that, where does it say how much longer is left on the auction? I usually do this on my app, so I'm not sure how to see
5
it.
days.
Oh, there we go. The 5 days and 20. So there's still 5 days left. So the 2 bids will climb nicely.
So Daniel.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
Oh no, go ahead, Nate.
I know Daniel was asking if they made vases for cars.
Yes, they did. And I will be selling one coming up, because literally the same week, the day after I visited the museum and I saw their car vases, I saw a car vase in an antique mall in Indiana, and they didn't know what it was. I was very happy. And it has the mount and everything. It's not just the vase. I have the mount and everything. So they just didn't know what it was. So yes, they do. I don't know how many different kinds they made. They did have a couple, and I don't think I highlighted those. Like, I really had to edit my video because there were whole cases that I did not get a chance to show, and whole colors that I didn't get to show.
Yeah.
Well, Cambridge glass has such a rich history that it would be impossible to showcase it all in one video.
Exactly. So I'm almost positive I had one that showed the EBON, and it bothers me that I'm not seeing it as I'm scrolling. So I do apologize for that.
It was a low black.
They had one section in the back that showed multiple colors, and this was one. This is something I've also never seen in the wild. It is a candle garden. So you have the flower frog here in the middle on a base that you would then put candles in. Now, from a functional standpoint, this does not hold water at all. So it's like you have to put dried flowers in it. But these are, like, you can see some of their original drawings. There's just some really cool stuff in the museum, and that was one that's kind of like, okay, what's on my wish list, or what's my unicorn? And there's some of the stuff that I saw here, like, oh yeah, I would love to have that in my collection.
Now, I'm assuming those candles would have been a little shorter so that the flowers didn't catch on fire.
You would hope so, but I find the whole thing in question because you wouldn't be able to put the water in to hold the. You wouldn't be able to have any water in the flowers, and I just don't see the benefit of that.
Maybe you could add some lucite candles to it.
There you go.
There wouldn't be any.
Just make it look pretty.
Fire.
And just some of the stuff that you can just see in the collection. This is still the ebony, so I do apologize.
That ebony is gorgeous.
It is.
I'm drooling.
It's just so. And then different people have different feelings, but I'd never seen the ebony with the gold. I'd seen what I now assume was black glass with the silver or the platinum. Those I recognized. I've seen before, and I like them. But just the pure black, just black glass. It's black glass, not black amethyst. Like, it's just gorgeous. So I think like we've actually gone longer than I'd anticipated. So at this point, I think we should wrap things up.
This has been a fascinating triptych, Patrick, and
Yeah, I loved it.
the audience has enjoyed it as well.
I hope so. I mean, like I said, this is something that we're going to try to do a little different. A little bit of problem with some of the technology. Like, what screen are you guys seeing right now?
I see tails from the triptych.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that too.
Okay. I'm trying to follow on another device, and that's not showing what it should be showing. So I'm like, I got very scared there for a second that you guys weren't seeing what I was seeing. So we're making it up as it goes along. But we've got Katie's going to be on tap next week. So if you enjoyed this, hopefully we'll refine it a little bit. But she will be hosting. So next Sunday will be on Katie's channel, Vintage and Vinyl. I did not think to put up a little image for that, but so Vintage and Vinyl. And she'll be hosting. And have you locked down what you think, or do you want to announce what you're going to be doing next week, Katie?
Yes, next week I'm very excited. I'll be doing a triptych on vintage and antique oil cans. So I think that will be a lot of fun. I believe the term is Petroliana. So I'm very excited about that. And I think it will be a fun triptych.
Excellent. And it's one of those, like, as we talked about the different topics, we have all kinds of topics that we've considered. We're trying to figure out the best way to do these, the best way to, kind of show what we want to show, because this, in my opinion, I hope you enjoyed it. I was able to show you stuff and talk about stuff that we never could have done in a deep dive or in a show and tell. And Nate is just so knowledgeable. I can't wait for Nate to do his first one as well.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, no, we're thrilled to have you. As we
Absolutely.
rotate around, you're going to get a lot of different subject matter, a lot of different ideas. But definitely, if you go into the comments, or, you comment to us privately, separately, whatever you want to do, give us your feedback. We absolutely want to hear feedback of what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see more of, ideas, just like we would take ideas for deep dives and for show and tell. The idea behind these is almost literally the sky is the limit. If we can find a website, if we can find a museum listing, we can find an article or a research article, anything we can find that we can kind of show pictures and, get into those unicorns of like the best of the best. There ain't no way I was going to find somebody to do a Cambridge deep dive that had a mannequin head. Like, that just wasn't going to happen. So we're excited that this is kind of like a little spin-off. And we hope you're excited too. So thank you to Katie, and thank you to Nate for joining me on this channel. And then next week I will be on Katie's channel. Katie, do you want to talk about what else you've got coming up this week?
Absolutely. We've got a lot of great content for you this week. And one of the things I'm excited about is our first duo dive will be this Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Patrick is going to be on my channel, and we will be talking all about punch boards. So if you love this new collection that Patrick has and you've been seeing it in his haul videos, now we'll really get to discuss it in depth. So I'm looking forward to that. That's our first duo dive Wednesday at 9:30 on my channel. So I'm excited for that. And then, of course, we got another triptych, which will be on my channel on Sunday at 8 o'clock on the Petroliana oil cans.
And what do you got coming up this week, Nate?
I'll be helping you at the Friday sale, obviously.
Which is Thursday for those of us in the United States.
Of course, it's Friday. It's Friday here. And I'm sure you'll see me at a number of sales and hauls through YouTube. And thank you to everyone who's been kind to me about my accent. There's been some very nice comments in the chat about my crazy accent.
Oh, your accent is not crazy at all. We love hearing it. And if you are not following the other channels, again, Katie's channel is Vintage and Vinyl, and Nate's channel is Soul Nate. You should be able to find it just searching Soul Nate, but there are some underscores in there. Also, you can follow all three of us on our individual Instagram channels, and all of those links I'll make sure are in the description of the video, because Nate has been posting some great collections that he's been adding to while they're in lockdown in New Zealand, because they are in lockdown right now. That as he's been refining his own collections and scouring what he can find online, he's got some cool additions to his collections coming up that I'm sure he'll be putting on his Instagram channel.
Yep, that's a collection that I blame you solely for.
I take 100% responsibility for your new addiction to inflation currency, to Notgeld.
Yep, I bought, you gifted me one very kindly, and I bought a couple from one of your sales. And in the last week, I think I've probably bought online about 250.
That is amazing, Nate. And we can't wait to see it. Nate has one of the most curated Instagrams ever to exist. So if you're not checking out Nate's Instagram, you really should be. You're missing out.
And if we play our cards right, I think Nate can probably turn that into a great triptych later, because that's, again, although he's personally becoming a little New Zealand museum of Notgeld, there's so much information online that talks about like how it was created, what the history was of, so if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, it's currency that was issued primarily in Germany between the two world wars, when inflation became so severe that their currency literally couldn't keep up. And so it was like almost little government issued IOUs, and the earlier ones are just amazingly well detailed. There's some great art. They are art forms in themselves to be able to pick up, and they're not particularly expensive. And from a free seller's perspective, they ship really inexpensively. So it is one of those that, Nate seems to have taken it to a whole new level, but he now is going to have all this research. He's been doing that. He's going to have so much stuff he can probably share with us someday on that collection. It'll be a great use of the triptych, Tales from the Triptych, because there's so much online that we can still yet to see. So
yeah. I think my first will be on English sterling silver.
And if you've not subscribed to Nate's YouTube channel, again, go find him. But you can go. He did I think it was at the beginning of all the COVID lockdowns. I think that's when I first discovered Nate, and he did some great. I think he even called them lockdown videos or locked. I can't remember. I was looking at your channel the other day, but he shows some of his collection. And he has some collections I'd never even heard of, and he does some really high end silver, and so it's really fun to see. So you can get a little sneak peek at what he collects.
Thanks.
He's very knowledgeable, and he will be able to give a great triptych. So he will be in 2 weeks. So in theory, we'll be all taking turns. It may not always be exactly round robin of the three of us in order. It might be based on what we're covering or whatever. But for now, I appreciate you joining my channel. Thank you so much for all of you that joined in. Thank you for all your kind comments. If you do have suggestions for improvements, we are 100% open to hearing them. And then make sure you tune back into Katie's channel, Vintage and Vinyl, next Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will cover Petroliana and the wonderful world of oil cans. So,
right.
Thanks everybody for joining, and
Thank you,
we'll
Brian.
talk to you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, friends.
Bye.